This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. So two things to talk about: Andrew Berry's pre-draft press conference, where we can see what his mindset is about that, an update about Deshaun Watson, and the Browns signed a former first-round pick, and why did they do that on the offensive line? Let's start with the Germain Ifedi signing. So the Browns signed him. He's a former first-round pick out of Texas A&M. It's interesting to see his career because Germain Ifedi, before I believe he had a knee injury at the beginning of his last year at Texas A&M, was projected to be like a top 10 pick in that year's draft. The injury made him fall all the way to the back of the first round, and he never really created that momentum again. Now, I don't think Germain Ifedi is going to be somebody who's going to be guaranteed a roster spot, but he is going to be somebody that's there for some insurance during the draft and for, some depth during camp. I think that they're bringing him in to make sure that they're not forced into taking a tackle in the draft. Because right now, if you look at the Browns roster, you would make an educated guess that they need to take a tackle. Now they can kind of wait and see if a tackle they like falls to where they like them in that draft as far as draft positioning goes, then they'll take them. If one doesn't, then they don't have to. They have Germain Ifedi to compete. They have James Hudson to compete. They still have all of these other kind of backup level tackle guys. Does it stop them from taking a tackle? No, but it does prevent them from taking a tackle just to take a tackle, if you get what I mean. If you follow what Andrew Berry does, you know that Andrew likes to put himself in position to not have to be forced to take a deal, right? He's going to wait for the market on Amari Cooper. He's going to wait for the market for these guys that he wants to trade for, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore. He's going to wait till it makes sense for him and hits his number before he makes that deal. He's the same way in the draft. He's not going to trade up just out of fear because he's scared that a player that he likes won't be there at a spot that he likes him. He's going to wait till that player is at that spot that he likes him, and he's not going to compromise. So that's kind of why I think they brought in Germain Ifedi. I think he's a good depth piece. Now let's talk about Andrew Berry's press conference that he had, talking about the draft. Let's get into it. So Andrew was asked a question about how long he thinks it takes a rookie to kind of get acclimated into the NFL enough for you to make an evaluation on him. This is an interesting question, and let's see what Andrew had to say about it.
It's a good question, Chris. I think it depends on position, and I think it depends on a prospect's individual, history. Like, for instance, O-line and D-line, they're typically longer developing positions. Running back, that's a position that typically plays, more quickly, but that can be variable depending on, hey, was this player a small school prospect that didn't have a ton of resources? Is he relatively new to the position? Is he relatively new to the sport? So that all can play a factor. I think what I would say is pretty consistent is that just like the transition from college to the NFL for rookies in general, regardless of where you're taking, it's hard.
Yeah, so he brought up something interesting there with like the small school guys, because usually when GMs or evaluators bring up small school guys, we're so focused on the level of play that you're evaluating against and how that's a projection. But I think Andrew does bring up a good point. It's like, hey, if you are somebody who's drafted from a D2, a D3, some FCS schools, you probably did not have access to the same nutrition, the same workout regimens, the same workout facilities, the same recovery facilities that a Power 5 cream of the crop school has, like in Ohio State or LSU. So there might be wear and tear to your body that you haven't been able to recover properly. There might be, limitations when it comes to medical staffs, right? We don't really think about that. But, you might have a medical issue that was able to be taken care of to a point at one school or be able to be identified to a point at one school, but they didn't really have the resources to take it to that next level. All of a sudden, you get your medicals done at the combine, things change. He also brought up how new that player is to the sport. I mean, that kind of explains why we stuck with Anthony Schwartz as long as we did, because Anthony Schwartz just had not played a ton of football prior to being drafted. So, just some interesting stuff about how they go about looking at when a player should be productive. Interesting to see that running back was one of those positions. He said, hey, we're not really going to wait around at that running back position for you to show it. Like, typically it's there or it's not. And I wonder how that's going to affect the evaluation of somebody like Jerome Ford, and if Jerome Ford is going to have a more reduced role this year, because maybe Andrew just did not like what he saw and has not liked the progression that he's seen, despite the fact that Jerome Ford put up solid numbers on paper. So the thing we all want to know, will the Browns use their pick at 54? Will they trade down? How aggressive will they be with their other picks? We kind of focus on that first pick, but I think the trade ups from 85, the trade ups from 156, those are going to be just as important. Let's hear what Andrew
and
says.
Tony, I will probably have a better feel to Zach's question, once those, once we get to 10 picks out. It really just depends on how the board falls. If I'm being truthful, Tony. So I'm not sure as we sit here today, but we'll see if we can break the trend of making it 3 years in a row without a second round pick.
Not having a first round pick.
Look, you want as many high picks as possible. I wouldn't say that I miss it on like Thursday or Friday night. I'm probably more focused on the players we can acquire. And they're not necessarily the end all be all. They're a great resource to have, but how you can deploy them can be in a variety of ways.
Yeah, and I think one of the things when you talk about the Browns draft this year is you really have to look at the pool of players in the draft. There's just not a ton of players that fit the Andrew Berry profile, which means that this doesn't seem like a draft where Andrew Berry is going to be looking to lead with a ton of guys. The Browns are already in a tough spot when it comes to the draft, right? This is something that, for the first 20 years of Cleveland Browns existence was not an issue. We always had room to roster draft picks if they were worthy, but that's not the situation that the Browns are in. The Browns would have a hard time getting to a 53-man roster right now before they draft a single soul. So I don't think they're going to bring in 6, 7, 8 new bodies to complicate that math who are already on rookie deals. I think that they're going to probably look to bring in 3 to 4 new players, right? That's what I'm anticipating, is that they bring in 3 to 4 guys. They'll cash in some of their later round picks and kind of just use them there, because one of the things I think people are forgetting is the Browns aren't going to have a lot of space for 6th and 7th round picks to make the roster this year, and they're not going to have a lot of space for 6th and 7th round picks to make the roster next year. Like, we're already at a point to where we're not even debating the 53-man roster with the Cleveland Browns. We're debating like who's going to get the 11 spots on practice squad. You have to imagine whoever doesn't get quarterback 3, so between DTR and Tyler Huntley, that's going to be somebody that has a practice squad spot. You have to imagine Cade York already has a practice squad spot. So you're talking about 2 practice squad spots already being taken up, the 53-man roster already being difficult to get to. Like, it's just going to be tough. Not saying that the Browns aren't going to roster anybody from this draft. Obviously, they're going to roster a 2nd round pick. They're going to roster a 3rd. And if they take a 4th and maybe a 5th, right? But there's just not a ton of space here. They have 4 6th and 7th round picks next year. They have 3 6th and 7th round picks this year. That's 7 spots where, I'm going to be real with y'all, out of those 7 picks, the Browns might roster 1 guy if they sit at those picks. So those picks are pretty expendable. And I think they're going to be willing to just dump those picks to move up a little bit to get guys that they feel like they can roster. Now we're going to move on to some of the Deshaun Watson questions that were asked of Andrew Berry. One of the questions is, hey, when they went to Andrew Berry, they said that this was a long-term play with Deshaun Watson. Given what they've seen over the last few years, is this still what it is with Deshaun Watson? Is it still a long-term play, or are they just trying to cash in on a quick window and try to move on as soon as possible?
You were asked to assess
the Deshaun Watson trade, and you said at that time you view it as a 10-year horizon. I mean, those were your words. So are you talking about another contract with Deshaun when you say 10-year horizon?
I'm talking about as like, I think the one thing that's pretty unique about the quarterback position in our sport is, when you find a good one, they're typically with your franchise for a long period of time. So when I say 10 years, maybe I didn't mean it quite as literally as you're taking it, but for a very long period of time, because that player at that position, can really anchor your franchise and anchor your organization on the field. So as we think about it, it's less about a yearly fluctuation, but very much with a long-term focus. Because look, quarterbacks, I mean, they're not all Tom Brady playing until they're 45, but quarterbacks in this league, they play to their mid and late 30s, and that's an incredibly valuable player to have.
So you are beyond this one contract when you think of that.
Yes, sure, Jeff.
Yeah, I think what the Browns are hoping to get out of Deshaun Watson is multiple windows, right? This year, they know that they have a window, and last year was part of that same window. What they want out of Deshaun is, hey, we want to be able to get a second window out of you and possibly a third window out of you. If they're able to get 2 championship windows, like legitimate championship windows where they live up to expectations, they win a bunch of games, they make the playoffs, they have a chance to win the Super Bowl, they get multiple windows, so 2 or 3, I think they will view this trade as a success, because that's why they made the trade for Deshaun Watson. I think people, because of the sensationalism around Baker Mayfield, get it twisted with why the Browns had to move on from Baker Mayfield. The issue was not that Baker Mayfield was incapable of putting together a good season. We all know that Baker Mayfield is capable of putting together a good season. What Baker Mayfield has never proven that he is capable of is putting together consistent bodies of work over a stretch of years, right? Say what you want about Deshaun Watson, 2018 to 2020, so 3 seasons, he put together a very strong back-to-back consistent body of work. Baker Mayfield, we still are waiting on him to put together 3 solid years back-to-back of consistently good work. He just isn't somebody that you would feel comfortable throwing a lot of money at, relying on, because he's not consistent. Where Deshaun, that's why they felt comfortable. Will that ultimately be the right call? We'll see. But I think that's what the Browns thought that they could get out of Deshaun Watson was, we can get one, well, we know we're going to get 1 championship window out of it, right? That's not even part of it. You want to get 2 to 3 championship windows out of the career of Deshaun Watson in the Cleveland Browns uniform. If you get that, then you feel pretty good about the trade. If you don't, then, it's going to be a disappointment.
Where he's at, and are you satisfied with where he's at right now?
Yeah, we have a regular cadence, regular checkpoints, Tom. This week, Deshaun was throwing up to 40 yards. Like he's in a pretty good spot. Again, like I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse. Thank you. But he's progressing, as appropriate. We're really, really pleased with the work that he's put in, and really pleased with how the shoulder's responding. But we're still in the middle of a rehab process, so we know that it can take different left and right turns, but we're pretty optimistic in terms of what we've seen so far.
With Nick, and I'm sure you guys want to be.
All right, so hearing that he's throwing 40 yards is very encouraging. Deshaun mentioned in his press conference that he's throwing all of his rehab throws with regular velocity, so he's not hitching or kind of hinging his throws. So he's throwing 40 yards with what I would assume to be regular velocity, which is good. I mean, you can't really throw 40 yards with tiny velocity unless the football is made out of helium, right? This is not how physics work. You got to throw it hard to get it down the field. But yeah, it's good to hear that everything's going on track. I am still wondering why there was that slight change of messaging from Deshaun will be ready for the spring to Deshaun will be ready for the season. Maybe that's the person in charge of the physical therapy in LA saying, "Hey, Deshaun, slow it down, pump your brakes. You're being a little bit too aggressive with this rehab." Maybe it's them trying to temper themselves or temper outside expectations, but it is a change of messaging, right? From the start of spring to he's definitely going to be back for the start of the season. And the only reason I feel like this is something I point out is because of what we went through during the season, where the messaging changed from he's definitely going to play against Baltimore to he's definitely going to play after the bye week to we'll see if he plays against Indy to he's going to give it a go. And then it went to, well, he wasn't ready to go. Like, we have had a lot of weird messaging with this shoulder specifically when it comes to Deshaun Watson and how these injuries have gotten handled with him, the Cleveland Browns, and his camp. So that's why I want to keep a close ear on what these guys are saying and when it changes, because we have learned through last year that stuff can't be ignored, because we ignored it last year and look what happened. So that's something to look out for. But overall, I'd be very encouraged to say Nick Chubb's running on ground now. So that's great. It sounds like a great update. Now, again, the ligament damages, it's more lateral. And I hope that he's able to get most of that lateral explosiveness back, because that's a lot of what makes him Nick Chubb. But I think that the Browns are in a good place. Let me know what you think about this. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.